Hello, everyone, and welcome to Theory into Practice. I am Dan Scott, and today I have a guest that I met when I was going through the Emergency Management Professional Program Executive Academy. And it was the first person I ever heard say they grew up wanting to be an emergency manager. And it was an amazing statement. And ever since then, I've gotten to know her and we've become friends. We've seen each other at several events. We both are members of the International Association of Emergency Managers, CEM. She gave me some advice on achieving my CEM. Sara Ruch, welcome to the show and thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to be here. I've seen posts and everything and listened occasionally, so it's a thrill to be on with you.
Well, so you're currently the Deputy Director of Emergency Management at James City County.
Yeah, I'm the Deputy Coordinator for James City County, Virginia. Yes.
So give us just a quick, a little bit of a background, because one of my introduction is you grew up wanting to be an emergency manager. You went to school to get your degree in emergency management, and that in itself is amazing. It's one of the things I want to help promote in the field of emergency management, people growing up to be emergency managers. People say they want to be police officers and grow up to be firemen or whatever, doctors. I want them to say, I want to grow up and be an emergency manager. And you have some great insight into that. So I'd like you to share a little bit of the road that you took in making that decision.
Sure. It was a little windy. It's not as straight as some people have it nowadays. And I could say that because emergency management programs in college were just kind of beginning when I was starting to go to college. But anyway, to go way back, I grew up in the Grand Forks, North Dakota area, but on the Minnesota side of the border. And in 1997, there was a massive flood of the Red River of the North. And so the adjacent community, East Grand Forks, Minnesota, basically every home was affected there. And our small little town of 500 that I grew up in was the closest place for the National Guard to stage at. So they came in and totally took over our school building. So we didn't have school for a month, not necessarily because our town was affected by the flooding, which some of the rural family farms were around our area because it's so flat up there. But because the National Guard came in and they were using the school as a staging area to help do response and recovery over in East Grand Forks. And so I literally just got kind of thrown into emergency management. And I don't know if anybody else can relate to this, but I was in junior high or maybe a freshman in high school. And I was bored because I was out of school. And I don't know about anybody else out there, but when I was bored, my mom would go, where's your father? What's your father doing? Can you go see if he's doing anything or what he's doing, or go tag along with him for a while, or go find your father. So my dad was actually the volunteer fire chief for 20 some odd years in our small little town. And with being the volunteer fire chief, he was also the de facto emergency manager. So I helped him organize the little bit of sandbagging that we did do prior to the flooding, which prevented flooding in our community. We also ended up opening up our small little fire station for people that were staying with relatives or in friends' homes or whatever. We did a donation drive in there. And then we also had like our little mini EOC. And I say that because it was basically my father, myself, and our city clerk that worked out of the fire station and then just tried to fix things. So it was a very busy and interesting time, to learn about emergency management and what it was. So since we were the closest place to East Grand Forks that had not flooded, we had a lot of people coming through. We had a lot of press coming through. People from the AP would come and do stories on East Grand Forks. So I got to meet a lot of press people. FEMA came through and talked to us about anything that we needed. I got to work with the National Guard. In fact, the other day, my parents brought me up some of my old stuff that they still had. And one of it was actually a stack of notes that I had taken during the 1997 flood, where I would go and talk to I don't know what rank he was over in the National Guard, but the main person over there, I want to say colonel, but that's probably wrong. The main person that was in charge of the deployment over there. And they still had the notes. So I still have my notes for when I was going back and forth and helping with meetings and trying to figure out things. So that was really my first foray, I guess, into emergency management. Met people from the Red Cross, started looking into how does one get into emergency management. There really wasn't any sort of direct path at that point, and I hadn't heard of anything. FEMA did have some IS courses online by the time I graduated high school, so I took several of those. Or graduated college. So I took several of those in the meantime, in between getting my first job and graduating from college or grad school. So anyway, next I had to figure out, well, how do I get into emergency management? So there wasn't, to me, any obvious coursework when I went into college. That was in 2000. And I decided, well, FEMA is part of the federal government and political science is the study of government. So I went into political science, and I also got a major in international relations, which really helped cover the logistics and like the war type aspect of like how different things were handled and situations. So it was really a combination of the two that I graduated with. And by the time I graduated, and I was also an intern out at in DC for a senator for one semester as well. So I got to work with some of his staff on some FEMA stuff. There wasn't a whole lot at the time, but I learned a lot more about agriculture and some of the zoonotic diseases that were going on at the time and how they were combating them. And then one of the things that at the time I didn't think would apply that much to my future career was working with the gentleman who handled energy. And so I got to go over to the energy department and work on help him with a couple things, take some notes. And that was dealing with radiation. And I didn't realize that would become a good chunk of what I do now is preparing for some sort of a nuclear power plant issue, because we're within a 50-mile zone of that. And then by the time I graduated college, a local university, North Dakota State University, had an emergency management program. They also had a master's program. So then I went through that, and I met Carol, who was one of our instructors, Carol Seaback, who was one of our instructors up at Emmitsburg, and several other people at the time. And it was just through making connections and trying to figure out, how does one get a job in emergency management? That was, what I really wanted to do. And I was still at the point of, okay, well, I got all this education. Now, how do I actually get a job? And so that led me to Virginia, because I said, I'm willing to do whatever, because I've had this idea in my head since 8th or 9th grade as into what I wanted to do. I'm willing to go wherever in the country in order to try it, because you never know unless you try, right? So I'm like, I had the backing of my parents. They said, the worst that happens is you don't like it, you don't like where you live, you don't like the job, and you can always come home. And that was one thing that definitely helped the moving from Minnesota to Virginia it was like, you can always go home. If you don't like it, then you have a bachelor's and you have a master's. You can find a job in something else up home if that's what you want to do, because you just didn't like the area or like what emergency management was. So, but I was lucky, and I got out to the Hampton Roads area, and I just happened to hit emergency management during a time where FEMA was expanding into several new programs. So I helped write some of the initial urban area security initiative documents for Hampton Roads to become a UASI. And that was when I was at the Hampton Roads Planning District Commission, which was my first job, which I actually got through a connection, or helped. I'm not going to say I got it, but it helped that Carol knew Tammy, and Tammy was hiring. And so I ended up getting the job through a connection through my college. And so I started working on UASI stuff. And then a year or so in, I'm like, wait a minute, it was just a planning job and I can write plans with the best of them. But if you don't understand, this is my opinion, if you don't understand how something works, it's one thing to have a plan and to come out of college or grad school with all this knowledge and these theoretical ideas or how something was done in the past. But if you don't know your community and how it operates and what's worked or the history behind some decisions that were made, the plan's not going to be so great. So that was one detriment that I had coming from Minnesota to Virginia, was I needed to overcome what I thought I knew and get some actual practical experience in Virginia. So then I applied for a job at the city of Hampton, and I ended up staying there for 10 years. I started out as a planner. I became the deputy. I was the interim coordinator for a while, and then I went back to deputy again. And then I ended up with my job up here in James City County, where I'm the deputy again. But I really run my own program up here. The fire chief is the coordinator, and he is super supportive in whatever I want to do or wherever I want to take the program. I love doing community outreach. So that's one of the things that we focused on up here quite a bit. And then, as I've mentioned before, we're actually in the 10-mile EPZ for the Surrey nuclear power plant. So I didn't realize how much time that was going to eat up. So those are kind of the two areas that I've been concentrating on recently, but we still have the regional catastrophic planning grant that's going on that I helped with early on in my career when I went to Hampton, like right after I came over from the planning district. And then we're still a UASI, thankfully. And I still help a lot with those programs, and then also with grants in the region and being an expert or a peer reviewer for those grants. So that's just a little bit.
No, that's a you know, it's a little bit of a lot, you know, that's happening, but it really establishes the road you took from wanting to, you know, finding a little bit of a curiosity to what is emergency management, to really going down the road to saying, I want to be an emergency manager. And it, you know, ultimately have led you to a place where you are stepping into not only able to help your local jurisdiction and your community in what you do, but also help drive the profession forward in the things that you do. You take, so you have set as a president of the Virginia Emergency Management Agency, correct?
Yeah, I was a past president of the Virginia Emergency Management Association. So
and that's you know, that in itself is you know, a contribution to not only you as an individual, but to the profession in which we are trying to make better. And one of the things I really want to hit on in the next segment with leadership is the leadership that you've implemented into really put some of the programs that you've designed and continue to work on in place, but also women in emergency management, how we better promote women to step into the field of emergency management, and how that works. But give us an idea. I want you to give you a little bit of time right now to really just promote your program and brag on your program and let people know where they can come find your program and you as well.
yeah, sure. So as I mentioned before, I work for James City County, Virginia. We're a fabulous, I like to say, little community in a big area. So we're more suburban than anything else. People might know us from Jamestown. Jamestown Island is in James City County, so I get to work with the National Park Service, and then we also have a separate state organization here, which is the Jamestown Yorktown Foundation. So as a huge history buff, I absolutely love working with those organizations and finding out, you know, what do they do during a hurricane, and how do they protect the artifacts that they found, and those sorts of things. And then I try, if they need any assistance, I try and help them with that. We also have Busch Gardens here in James City County. So that's something fun and different. Not every place has an amusement park, and then can still also maintain its rural nature. The upper end of the county is very, what I like to think of as rural. It's farms, fresh corn, horses, sunflowers. So with all of that, it really makes for a wide breadth of emergency management programs and outreach that we can do. So we have those that are in the upper end of the county, in the more rural area, where our preparedness and outreach to them is slightly different. They're, I hate to say, a little bit more prepared, but they are generally, because they're used to having the power go out, it being in a rural area where the power lines run a little bit longer, and there's more chance for something to go out. And then you have all the tourists that come in. So how do you target and make emergency management interesting without scaring off the tourist population during hurricane season? So there's that. We work collaboratively with our neighbors quite a bit. The whole Hampton Roads region is very collaborative, but then Williamsburg, Yorktown, and us in James City County are considered the historic triangle, and basically like the birthplace of democracy in the United States. So there's a lot of history there. We also have some military installations up here. So there is that whole aspect, and working with them, which is always fun and different and interesting. I've rewrote our EOP from top to bottom when I first came here. I know we're going to talk about leadership later, but I fully believe that emergency management is a team effort, especially in a smaller program. So for my program, it is the fire chief and myself. I have an absolutely awesome planner who we just hired. He hasn't even been here a year yet. And he also graduated from North Dakota State University. So, and then I have a CERT coordinator, CERT CART coordinator. And so there's really kind of just like the three of us, Michael, Mike, and myself, and then the fire chief pops in occasionally as needed whenever, we need some additional assistance. So we work on a lot of grants as well. I mentioned grants earlier. I don't know why. I must be a glutton for punishment. I love reviewing grants, and I actually kind of enjoy writing them. And that's because I think with grants, you get to tell your story. Why do you want or need this piece of equipment? Why do you want to do this exercise? So I get to incorporate that history of James City County. For example, the State Homeland Security Grant Program that I applied for this year, they wanted to target underserved communities with CERT. So I did some research, and mind you, I was never expecting to end up in a college library ever again in my lifetime. I was thinking I was done. And there was a couple of books on African-American communities in James City County, or free slave communities in James City County. And the documents were actually held over at William and Mary over in Williamsburg. And so I got to sit there and leaf through these older books and documents to find out how some of our underserved communities ended up being there, and what might have possibly contributed to the area being underserved. So I know grant writing is not super sexy. It's not response, but I think if you can dig into, I think it gives you the opportunity to dig into your community and understand your community a little bit more. If you go beyond just the surface level and try to explain why you need that grant. And it's really building a full picture. So I like doing grants. I mentioned the nuclear power plant. So I'm under Surrey, and then we have another one called North Anna that's up around the Richmond area. So I was just in the Virginia Emergency Operations Center yesterday, being a controller for their exercise, the North Anna exercise. Always interesting to see how the state does something, because you're sitting here twiddling your thumbs during, our exercises going, what are they doing? Well, now I understand what they're doing and where and what's going on in different parts. And then so there's the plans, there's the public outreach and the grants, and all of it really, especially, the plans, you can't, in my opinion, you can't do without it being a team. So, and I consider our team not only the folks in the department or in my division, but really being a smaller community, it's, all of the other department heads. And I have just a super supportive team here in James City County, and you can ask them to do anything, any given day of the week. And just explain why, you think we need this done, or need some help or support with something, and they're all over it. I mean, super supportive. I've been other places or seen other places work, and you don't always get that support. It's like, well, but I got all this stuff going on, and I don't have time to do the emergency management thing. Why don't we wait? Let's wait until like 2 weeks before we think we're going to have a hurricane or something. And that doesn't always end up very well. So that's just a little bit about our program. People can reach me. Our website is jamescitycountyva.gov. My email is sara.ruch@jamescitycountyva.gov. Or if they want to email me on Gmail, that's fine too. It's the same thing, sara.ruch. But I have a CEM after that one at gmail.com. And, I'm more than happy to talk to people. My new thing, because I feel like I'm in a good spot right now where I might have something hopefully good to contribute or add to someone's perspective, is I love to mentor. So I'm a mentor for the CEM. I am a mentor within our own county organization. And I just know that I was super lucky when I got started to have people that believed in me and supported me. And like I said, my college was super supportive. They were the ones that introduced me to my first job. And then I always had super supportive bosses or other female figures, because I've mainly been under fire most of my career, to see some of the ladies that were like the first females to be in the fire department, and how they rose through the ranks. They always had really good tips and stuff. So I won't get too far into that. But that's, just a little bit about our community. And I just really like where I'm at, because it's so different. Like any day I can do a half a dozen different things, and between tourists and rural horse farms, I mean, that's a wide swath right there. So yeah.
It sounds like it, and the work you're doing is amazing, and thank you for taking the time to share it with those who are taking the time to listen and watch Theory into Practice. And ultimately, just thank you for what you're doing. The mentorship is huge, and we'll talk about that in the leadership segment as well. As mentorship is huge. One of the things that I push the strongest in what it is that I'm doing is the need for more people to step into mentorship roles, but also the need for more people to ask to be mentored.
Mhm.
And so that's awesome for you to be contributing to the profession in that manner as well. Thank you so much for taking the time to just sit here and tell us about your program.
Well, thank you for having me. I really appreciate it.
For all those who are listening, if you found value, please like, comment, and share this episode to someone who could potentially benefit from it as well. My goal is to bring value. I am Dan Scott. Let's get better and let's do it together.